Sometimes a game comes along and I just want to talk about it. And then when I put words to the page, I find out that sometimes there's just not all that much to say. Sometimes the game is really simple mechanically, or I just like the game because of its innate simplicity. There's nothing wrong with liking a game that isn't as challenging as some others or can be described very easily, but it sure wouldn't be super entertaining to wait for my lazy bones to put out a weekly video show, only to entertain for 2 or 3 minutes total. So that's why I'm putting together this very top 10 countdown. This is the Hipster Snek, and today I'm going to showcase 10 games I've, at one point or another, considered or even attempted to review in the past as part of one series or another, but found myself only able to talk about it for a short time each. The rules are simple. One game per franchise, and it has to be a game I would have otherwise taken the time out to review had I more to say on the subject. And all the games will be identified by both their title and the sub-series of videos their review would have otherwise have been a part of. So without further ado, let's get this countdown started in a series of mini reviews for your enjoyment. Number 10. Among Us, IndieX. An indie breakout sensation that released almost 3 years ago. That aside, this game includes a very simple rule set. You make your little spaceman and you can customize them accordingly by picking a color or some optional outfit items. You're then split up randomly into one of two teams. You're either the crewmates or the imposters. Crewmates win the round if they can complete their tasks to 100%, which basically never happens, so don't count on this, or by sussing out the imposters and voting them off the ship. Imposters win when there are not enough crewmates left standing to vote them off, or if they successfully sabotage the ship. The gameplay mechanic that turns this from an interesting collection of mini-games, as these tasks were designed to be effectively completed either by touch or computer input, is when the human element enters the equation. Whenever a body of a fallen crewmate or an emergency meeting is called, chat opens up for all players who aren't presently at room temperature, and the team then has to work together to figure out who the enemy rightfully is. And human psychology is, shall we call it, imperfect? For example, once when I was tasked with being the imposter, I took the chance to off an innocent crew member, only to be immediately spotted and reported by one who came in behind him, just out of my sight. They began panicking and pointing blame at me, so I replied as calmly as I could manage, "That was sloppy, just killing that poor guy right there where everyone could see it happen." And the entire crew turned against the man who, rightfully, accused me and jettisoned him out into the cold vacuum of space. I really enjoy playing this game, but as there was no sense of progression nor any achievements, I had a hard time fleshing out a more robust review. Pick it up for yourselves if you haven't already and murder all your friends. Number 9. Mountain. Don't make games like. More an interactive screensaver than a game in any meaningful sense, I can't even accurately account for how I came to own this game. I'm assuming it must have been part of a Humble Bundle because this game is not a game I would ever buy. But it's not even actually a game, as that implies you're actively doing something. Mountain begins by asking you to mouse art some random prompts, and then it generates a little floating island suspended in space, and if you hate yourself enough to sit on your hands and watch for long enough, sometimes random items will just pass by and poorly clip into the island. You can use the mouse to rotate the island around and input from the keyboards to play music notes, which I later learned can be comboed together to prompt cheat codes, which is about the entirety of the 5 minutes of fun that I actually had after learning Funky Town in-game. There's also a cheat for throwing a star at the mountain and obliterating it, which apparently will just happen after the island is old enough, but that's literally all there is to it. Just sit there and watch an island sitting in space while pseudo-philosophical nonsense periodically shows up on screen like some kind of built-in magic 8-ball. At least in an idle game, I'd have the novelty of my numbers getting bigger from wasting my time and system resources to run the application. As it stands now, it's a screensaver in an era where they're no longer useful or welcomed. Number 8. Metal Slug XX, Obscure Reviews. A series of arcade classics, the Metal Slug games are known for many things. Tight, fast run-and-gun gameplay, excellent sprite work, and an endless appetite for your quarters. However, with arcade ports of these classics now being available on Steam with unlimited digital quarters available to be plunked on in, they're more accessible than ever despite their incredibly sadistic game design. However, even with modern installments, these games stay true to their tough-as-nails designs, with strong emphasis on frenetic co-op enabled action. There's never a dull moment, nor a level I've yet to clear without paying an extra digital quarter to feed the machine. Combine things like a stable roster of iconic playable characters, including cameos from the Ikari Warriors and King of Fighters Leona, and you have a game that's worth playing over and over again no matter how much it abuses you. Number 7. 100% Orange Juice. Don't make games like. Apparently being the Super Smash Bros. Title for the dev team named Orange Juice, a massive crossover event with characters from a bunch of their games, you'd think I'd be a little bit more merciful on it. I mean, it's obscure, it's indie, it's a passion project by a small team, and it's anime as all get out. So what did I think about it? It's one of the worst games I've ever played in my life. Just watch the trailer for this game. No, seriously, go watch it right now, I'll wait. And notice that the gameplay consists entirely of clicking the mouse to roll simulated dice. And then, in a shocking break from convention, you click to roll simulated dice. And sometimes you engage in battles between characters, which is resolved by clicking to roll simulated dice. When you die, you spend your turn trying to revive, which is done by clicking to roll simulated dice. At the very least, Mario Party interrupted the rotation with a minigame or something that had some chance of not being random number generator versus random number generator. The characters are all drawn by, if not designed by, the same person, so they all blend together into this morass of generic moe, and the attempt at giving them stats only finagles the simulated dice rolls a little bit. And, if you want to talk dominant strategy, just pick a character that has the highest evasion, because defense doesn't do anything. If you win a defense roll versus an attack roll, you'll take damage anyway. The maps are lazily designed from the dull to the outright player hostile. The gameplay never breaks from singular clicking in hopes of getting that dopamine kick from a lucky RNG resolution. In short, it's an incompetent mess that doesn't make me want to buy any of the game's devs' games. The only reason this rant is a link that it is, and not its own video, is because that's all I have to say about this game. The gameplay just ends there. Oh, but here's a fun story real quick. I once vented these frustrations with this game to a group who played it and was told I was only mad because I was, quote, bad at the game. When I asked how one can be bad at a game that exclusively boils down to RNG, all I received in turn was crickets. Quite telling, I'd say. In short, don't make games like 100% orange juice. Number 6. 20XX IndieX. Action platformer roguelite inspired by the likes of Mega Man X to the point where sometimes I play and wonder where Axel is? Haha, worry not. The lead character is a girl, you guys. Working under rather shady circumstances, the two main characters, Nina and Ace, have to destroy a set of bosses whose levels appear in semi-random order, and you pick one of 3 options until none remain. With the ability to power up between each run in addition to making choices like picking the boss you defeated signature weapon or a different power-up instead, all resulting in your per-run customization. Add in the frenetic co-op mode and you have quite the fun package. Though it gets kinda Mega Man 7-ish with its final levels, the game is still a joy to play, and I recommend it highly for anyone who likes platformers, shooters, or anything Mega Man related. Also, small update from future Snek, the game's sequel, 30XX, just released on Steam. Check them both out. Number 5. BroForce / ExpendaBros IndieX. I grouped these together as they're basically just an expansion of one another, with ExpendaBros being a very short game and BroForce being the more fleshed out experience. With up to 4-player co-op in a completely destructive environment, paying homage to 80s action film goodness with references to just about every action film there is worth mentioning, you cycle rapidly between a wide cast of bros who fight together to destroy Satan, yes, literal, actual Satan, and his band of evil terrorists, and set every level to explode behind you as you leap onto the rope ladder dangling below a helicopter. The simple pixel graphics are a facade to a shockingly sophisticated shooter game with unlimited options for progression through each level, fantastic guitar-heavy soundtrack, and couch co-op par excellence. If you haven't played these, you owe it to yourself to do so. Number 4. Puzzle Agent, Obscure Reviews. A quirky adventure title inspired by Twin Peaks, but with an emphasis on the truly surreal and bizarre. It doesn't take long for the titular agent to realize that the bizarre locals are suffering due to the whims of once-thought mythical creatures in the nearby lumber mill, and he must put his puzzle-solving skills to the test in order to figure out what all is going on. Using a simple black outline kind of sketchbook aesthetic, the game has a sort of charm to it that I find irresistible upon first seeing it. And amusingly enough, the hint items in the game being chewing gum adds a certain character-driven flair to every aspect of game and story. While I don't think the sequel was all that amazing, the first game is a must-play for anyone with an appreciation for old-school puzzle games. Number 3. Blade Kitten, Obscure Reviews. A game so good it single-handedly killed Australia's biggest game dev. Wow, how could I not talk about this? A sort of Star Wars by way of anime kind of setup, the game seems to expect the player to know a short novel's worth of lore and backstory, given that it just kind of throws everything it has at you as soon as it can. It all comes off as a bit overwhelming for gameplay that's nowhere near as demanding. In fact, the gameplay seems to suffer a litany of game design choices that, on paper, would speed up the gameplay, but in execution, ends up making the whole thing feel more clunky than an alternative might have. I want to like this game, but it is a very deeply flawed title, whose failures are more confusing than they are atrocious. I don't feel like I overpaid for it, but at the same time I did get the game for 74 cents. Number 2. Strange Telephon, NDX. Man, this game is weird. It's a very short, pixelated, quirky adventure title from Japan, and some of the logic required to complete the game reflects this. You play as an estranged girl, Jill, and her living telephone, Graham. Then you can dial a 6-digit number, including 0 through 9 and the pound and asterisk, each taking you to a different room upon completing the number. This sounds like there'd be millions of configurations, but there actually aren't. There's only about a dozen or so, and they need to have a lot of overlap and repeats. While a journal in-game can record the useful ones, you'll generally not need this too much. While in one of the worlds, you have a limited time to explore each room and any immediately adjacent zones to the number you dialed by moving left and right. The idea is to solve puzzles, which I was able to do about 75% without help before I broke down and referenced a guide. To give you one example of the moon logic in this game, you need to complete Thomas Edison's light bulb by cutting and burning bamboo. But to do so, you have to place a flower on a grave to get the moon to rise so that the bamboo is big enough to chop with your axe. Oh right, you steal the axe from this bird plant thing. Did I mention this game was loosely inspired by Yumi Nikki? Kind of a thing. And I don't even remember how I even got the flower in the first place. Once you finish the light bulb, you have to, while it's both on and off, visit a psychedelic flower creature and show it a moon rock, which you can get by using binoculars on the window when the moon's up, don't ask, in order to enter a subspace that you can't call into, and show the personification of the hippocampus, yes, seriously, that looks like Excalibur from Soul Eater in order to get 2 of the endings. And it's things like this that make the game frustrating to people who lack certain cultural context. There's 11 endings, several of which are minor variations of one another, and at least 3 are just ways of getting Jill killed. I enjoyed my time with it, but it's a difficult title to recommend for obvious reasons. And before we hit number 1, let's talk about 2 special honorable mentions that have managed to make this list. Anachronax, Obscure Reviews. Originally brought to my attention via fan request, this bizarre and surreal sci-fi action RPG adventure title basically doesn't run on any computer that I have access to, and I cannot for the life of me figure out the how or why. But a detective story set in space with a sharp comedic edge to the writing and an irreverent way of teaching the player their place by having the initial combat tutorial deliberately rough you up a bit as you get a feel for it is far too interesting for me to let go. But until I overcome these limitations, this will be as far as I know the story for. Alas, maybe someday. Evo, Theory of Evolution, Obscure Reviews. This would have been the follow-up to my Evo Search for Eden review, but PC98 emulation is not amazing. I mean, the PC98 was not amazing on its best days, but trying to run this game, or any attempt at getting anything PC98 related done, is just not happening. But that's what happens when Japan wants a special-made PC with its own iteration of DOS on it, and yes, that's literally all the PC98 ever was. So I've given up on any efforts to get it working. It just wasn't meant to be. That said, it's time for number 1. Pac-Man 256 Snek Suites. It's Pac-Man, except it's also co-op enabled roguelike arcade-style dungeon maze where you have to escape an ever-encroaching wall of glitches inspired by the actual bug present in the original arcade cabinets of Pac-Man, where getting past level 255 resulted in a glitchy, unplayable version of the original game's map, all the while killing ghosts to rack up huge point combos. This game is super cool, super fun to play, has tons of ways to improve your special abilities, and yes, you can unlock special abilities to make each run easier, like a laser beam that destroys ghosts in line of sight, or a bomb that destroys them in a circular area. But it's so fast and so simple, it's literally Pac-Man with very minor twists. It was hard to elaborate much further, even with the different graphical settings, many of which were taken straight from Pac-Man Championship Edition. But it's fun, and it's definitely worth a look. And that's 10 games that I've wanted to review but couldn't find a way to do full reviews until now. Yeah, this might become something of a saga in the future when I start finding some more. What did you think of today's games? Were there any you knew of? Or better yet, ones you had never heard of before now? Let me know in the comments. I'd be curious to find out. This has been the Hipster Snek, and if you liked today's episode, you can hit the like button so I know. And for more like this, you can hit the subscribe and bell icons for more weekly content. Each week there's obscure reviews, Indie X, Snek Suites, and more. And now the same channel will also be home to the Tomodachi Bros podcast, where my two closest bros and I talk anime, movies, and more. So join me here each week for more, and I will see you there.